All right. So yeah, this is cover letters and interviews. What is the job market now? I'm Max Ebgen. I'm an academic specialist at Michigan State University, and um, which Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy of the Anishinaabe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. And the university resides on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw, and I live and work on that same land. And I'm tuning into you now from that. I'm a white male with glasses, mostly clean shaven, except I have a little stubble. Longish, wavy, dark hair with gray in it. I'm sitting in an office in my bedroom. Not bedroom, rather, in my office in my house. And okay, so then why am I here talking about cover letters and interviews, and why do I think I can talk about this? Well, years ago when I was applying for museum jobs, I got a lot of competing advice about what I should be doing and how I should be representing myself. And I have a very kind of wide, weird background in terms of my work experience. And I had some people telling me, oh, you have to parse things out and fill out a resume that only has this thing, part of your experience, or this part of your experience. And then somebody said, no, 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 you got to tell the story of what your whole trajectory is, that everything leads to this. And once I started to do that and I started to construct a cover letter, I was applying for jobs like crazy and not getting anywhere with anything. And once I started to do this and write a cover letter that actually talked about my career trajectory and was pithy enough to be on a page, then I started to get interviews like crazy, like tons of interviews. And it coincided with that. So I wouldn't necessarily say causation, but there was a strong correlation, I would say. And and from my own experience as a hiring manager, I can tell you that when I read cover letters, these are the kinds of things that I actually look for. Um, so yeah, so let's see here. Let's get to the slides. Why? Why should you create a cover letter in the first place, right? Because my thoughts are that the resume alone doesn't address your career trajectory. It will tell you about work experience, but that doesn't tell you where somebody's going and what goals they have and where they want to be, right? And how that relates to the position they're applying for. The resume alone does not address why one is applying for the position in the first place. You just get a resume. It doesn't mean that they necessarily have any interest in the organization at all. Resume alone doesn't address the communication style of you. It doesn't represent like how that should be something that shows people how you write and what kind of communication style you have. So let's talk about how do you create a good cover letter. And we're just going to run really quick through my sort of form of what a cover letter should look like. So here is what I want to talk through. It's what I think the cover letter should be. It should be one page. I know a lot of times people are saying, oh, you can do 1 to 2 pages. 2 pages isn't a deal breaker, but I challenge everybody here to try to express what needs to be expressed in this in such a curt and pithy way, an elegant way, that it can fit onto one page. You can play with font size, but I would keep it, the smallest I would make it is 11. Yeah. So the first thing is, dear whoever, if there's a person listed on the job call, then you can address it to that person. Do not use gender specific things like Mr. or Mrs. If there's a name, use it. Otherwise, use hiring manager. Never to whom it may concern. It's always if the person is there. If the person isn't there, then it's to the hiring manager, right? That's who you're addressing it to. Tell them the next thing is below dear whoever, it's your name. My name is Max Edgen. I'm applying for this position. You have to say what the position is because it aligns with your education and experience doing Y, right? Whatever that is. Quick little lines, like 2 to 3 sentences on this is where I got my education and this is my experience, right? The next paragraph, 3 to 4 sentences of what really is your education and experience. What did you do? right, in your education and experience, right? It's I went to the school, or I got this degree from here, and I've been working at this place. Now here is what I did in the degree, and here's what I did in this job, right? Just and about 3 to 4 sentences total. 3 to 4 sentences next on how the position aligns to your career trajectory and how it's the ideal opportunity for you. So this is where you put in things about specific things about the job call, certain bullet points that they have. Go ahead and address those things. You can't address all of them, but address some of the core things that might relate to other aspects of the job call, and talk about how how those things align to your career trajectory, where you're trying to go. And the next one is how you have the skills and experience necessary to bring success to the organization. Talk about what skill sets you have. What are the things that you're going to do to help lead that organization to the next chapter, whatever that's going to be, right? And that again is another 3 to 4 sentences. And then at the very end, thank you, your email, your phone number where you can be reached. You look forward to hearing from them. Done. Any questions about the cover letter? And I like I said, I have experience both as somebody applying for positions. I also have an experience as a hiring manager. And whenever I could see somebody writing a cover letter, usually if it was like 1 page, like I said, 2 pages is okay. But something that's pithy enough and clear enough and elegant enough to be explained like in a very succinct manner is is very attractive, right? You can read through it and it makes sense to you as a hiring manager. Like you understand what somebody's trying to achieve. Yeah. So any questions about that specifically? Any other ideas? Well, we are going to get to the other ideas too, but this is the secret sauce of what I used when I was applying for jobs before, where I was getting a lot of interviews. Yeah. So again, it's the dear whoever, if you have a name, or hiring manager, not to whom it may concern. Coven says, I'd also say that the cover letter is the one place that the hiring manager can really evaluate your writing communication style. Yeah, and that's the point that I was making before in the previous slide. That's the only place where somebody can actually see, like how you actually write, because they're not really going to see that in your resume. The resume is kind of a list. Allison, I have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Max. I would ask in the cover letter, would you, regarding your experience specifics, would you use that as an opportunity to mention key projects or specific notable experiences, or list like specific skills or kind of high level experiences that would be relevant to the job? Like, what would you favor in that context?
Yeah. Okay. In number 3, that's where you talk about your projects. That's education and experience, the main projects that relate to the position, right? And then number 5 is what skills you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
thanks.
it's both, because you do need a place for both. And but you have to really you have to be able to express what those skills are in about a sentence, right? Like and I was saying like 3 to 4 sentences, but anything that you write, um, ask for how you can make it shorter, always, right? Um, yeah. So yeah. So you put your education experience in the 3rd paragraph. In the 4th paragraph, how the position aligns to your career trajectory. So you're talking about what your goals are. They need to know that, and how this is an ideal opportunity for you because it matches your goals, right? And then how you have the skills and experience necessary to help them, right? And what you can offer them. And then there's the thank you and email and phone number where you can be reached. Any other quick questions before we move on? Okay, let's go over here. Okay, interviews. So you get the interview, right? And the one key thing that I want you all to remember when you're in any interview for any position ever is that You are interviewing them to see if you want to work with them. That's a hard thing to wrap your head around, I know. We all are thinking we have to ace the interview and be awesome, and yes, you do, but you're also, you really need to treat this as a situation where you're interviewing them to see if that's a good place you want to work. So if you're going to do that, you need to write 10 questions in advance of your interview. Go write down 1 to 10 and start asking questions. One of my favorites is to ask them to describe their company culture. What they tell you is either going to be true or not true, but it will give you a sense of what people are talking about with their own organization and what they think it is, right? And it, short of getting an internship with an organization, you have precious little opportunity to actually see what the culture is before getting into the organization, to actually see what the culture's like, and the culture drives everything. There's a quote from, can't remember who said it, but I'm sure somebody else can tell me about it. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. It does. And so you need to know what the culture is of the organization, and how people who work there are talking about it. I also like asking about, like, if they're in the midst of strategy development, or if they're in the middle of it, if they're in the usable part of it, and what are their strategic goals, or if they don't have one right now, how far off are they from their most recent strategic plan, because that needs to um, tell you what, it'll tell you where they're putting resources, right? And if you're in a place where those resources are being matched. Covenant, no, your comments are great. The cover letter can help tie together previous experiences/projects with a narrative that might not otherwise be obvious in the CV itself, too. For instance, if you were working on accessibility across many of the projects in your resume, the cover letter is a good place to do that. He thinks the cover letter helps to show how you make sense of your career. I couldn't agree more. So thank you, COVID. Seriously. In fact, we're going to have time for discussion too, and just that, and any notes that anybody wants to add to the chat or to stop me in the middle of what I'm talking about, please do. This is not really meant for me to be so much talking at you. I'm only doing that because we have so little time. And when you're in the interview, before the interview, look up their website, of course, and dig into what they're doing and what projects they're working on. Look at the position, what the position that you're applying for, like how that intersects with what you see on the website. Look at their 990. Dig into like where they're really putting resources. You can see where money's being spent, and how money's being made by the organization, and really look at it. Does what they talk about with the strategy really match where they're putting their resources, or has it for the last, the most recent line that you can see is about 1.5 years old. So, you got to take that into account. And look at other places, like what are people saying about them online, like in the news, like what are they in the news for any reason, good or bad, and like what's happening there, so that will inform any of those questions that you have. So and then during the course of your interview, in the discussion that you have, there might be the opportunity to cover a good like 5 of your questions, 6 of your questions maybe, but or 4 or 5, right? And the good thing is that there's nothing worse for somebody if I'm interviewing them and I ask them if they have any more questions and they don't have any. This way you have like 5 questions more. So if they say, do you have any questions? Well, yes, I do. I want to know about X, Y, and Z, right? You have to have those, right? So I'm not kidding about this. You have to have 10 questions before you go into any interview with somebody. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Okay, if you're doing an in-person interview, right, or if you're doing a video conference, right, dress for the job you want, right? That's advice people have given me over the years, right? And I will say, dress what you think the job is, right? Because there was one point where I was interviewing for a position with an organization that their culture was such that people just wore like Hawaiian shirts and shorts to work, right? Like it was very not traditional. And I would show up in these interviews in a suit, and they would say, "Why are you wearing a suit?" And I would say, well, this is a program manager position. This is a thing where I have to organize all this stuff, and most of the time I'm not going to be doing what you do. I'm doing this other stuff, so that's what I think the job is. And they're like, oh, okay, right? Um, and that was an acceptable answer to these people, right? Um, but it'll be interesting to see like what the um, different organizations have different cultures, and they'll be expressed in different ways, like how people are dressed, like how people conduct themselves, in addition to where they're spending resources and what they're doing. Okay, early is on time, always. Don't be late. Don't try to get, if the interview is for 1 p.m., don't be ready for the interview at 1. Be ready for the interview at 12:55, 12:50, right? Just be early. And what I mean by that is like, even if it's a video conference, you don't have to be like in the video conference, but you should be at your desk and waiting and ready 5 minutes before. Bring something to write with, to take notes or to doodle or sketch note, whatever you want to do. Just make sure you have something to write with, so you have something to refer back to. Bring any examples of your work or share them in a chat or whatever, if it's applicable to the position, right? And have those prepared so that you're ready to share them. And lastly, in caps, bring your 10 questions. Make sure you have them with you. How do you suggest gracefully handling the salary question when it comes up quite early in the interview process? We're gonna get to that. Any questions about the in-person before we move on? But thank you for your question, Kate. We are gonna address that. Okay, let's talk about over the phone, interviews over the phone. Again, dress for the job you want, even if it's over the phone, because there's a lot of research in theater, and I teach in theater, and I've got a background in theater, that putting on the costume or putting on the mask puts you in the mode of being the character. And that is true. There is research done on this, and yes, it's absolutely true. So get yourself set for what this is supposed to be before you get on the phone. Again, early is on time. Be ready for the call before the call comes, right? And here's the other one. Stand up while you're on the phone if you can. Stand up. I understand plenty of people, it's not a possibility, but even if you can't, smile when you're talking with them. And you're going to ask, why do you need to smile if you're on the phone? Okay, well, if I'm talking to you like this, or if I'm talking to you like this, did you notice the difference of the sound? It's slight, but the timbre of your voice physically changes when you smile while you're talking. So when you're on the phone, make sure you're smiling. It's okay if it's forced, but you have to you need to do that so that your voice gets there's a clarity to your voice that you get when you're smiling. And then have your 10 questions at the ready. Are you sensing a theme? You got to have those questions for the phone interview, for anything. It's super important for you to have them. Okay, the offer. I said I'd be talking about the salary stuff. You need to figure out in advance what your minimum salary and benefit requirements are. And I know it's not an easy thing to do, but think about this. Do you not have health insurance and you need it? In our culture, in this country, health insurance is tied to employment. So that's a real question. So that you want to figure out in that. You want to figure out, like, do you need to be the main breadwinner in your family? Do you need to have this much to live to support what your lifestyle is, right? What is that number? And what is the lowest number you can go, right? So and you need to know that low number. The reason you need to know that low number is for that last point there, is that more often than not, you're going to enter into a negotiation. Now, I'm going to put a little asterisk on this because I know there's weird things around it. But in any negotiation, your power position is that you have to be willing to walk away. You have to go, that's not for me, and walk away. And I know that's really hard, especially when you're in a job recruitment situation and you're interviewing for it and they're giving you an offer and they're putting that out there. You really want to take it, but you have to be willing to walk away because um, they're probably going to offer you, it's likely that they're going to offer you something as a negotiation. You also need to know if they list a salary range in advance, because if you want if you're going to make a case for how much more over your minimum you're going to request, that it needs to be within the range. If you go the stated range, because if you go to them and say no, it's way above that, that's probably not a great thing for them. But you can make a case for, here's the range and I should be up here, and this is why, right? And come up with those reasons that your education and experience, what you've done, puts you in that position, so that you're prepared to talk about that in during the offer. And here's the sticky part. It's I'm saying counter the first offer. Just do. It, more often than not, people are trying to do a negotiation, and they're looking to state something. They're trying to get you for the good price, right? So counter with something, right? And if you know what the range is, then you can counter up, right, with that. Other Coven says, to Max's point, this is particularly true for jobs at universities. Often those classifications are very hard ceilings and floors. You can usually find out in advance what those are. Yeah. You some museum jobs are stating ranges, but academic jobs for sure state ranges, right? And those oftentimes, depending on the organization, those ranges can be very hard and fast, right? So you need to figure out what those are, but you can make that that argument for, I should be higher in this range for this reason. Does that all make sense? And does that answer any of your points that you wanted to know about Kate? And Marie Louise says, particularly in government-funded institutions. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Max. I also wanted to know, sort of, because museums, a lot of museums, smaller museums are in difficulty right now financially. If they are lowering their salary range, I know what I'm worth, but I guess it goes back to the be willing to walk away.
Yeah, it does. I mean, because that's the thing too. Like if because the other point, like I know some people are saying like, oh, I tried to negotiate and then they just dropped me, right? And that can happen.
Yeah.
But my argument to that is, well, good, you dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to work there.
Yeah.
If they can't do that, if they can't like play ball, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I especially if you're not, if you're going for something that's way high and it's way out of there, they should at least have the grace to say that is too much for us, we can't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they really want you, they'd come back to you and say, would you consider this? But if they're not, if they aren't sophisticated enough to know how to negotiate, and they're in a hiring position, I would be very wary of working for that organization.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Marta, you're talking about how it works in USA museums or companies in general. Marta, I'm going to say my experiences in US companies, so that's my knowledge base. So that it might very well work very differently in other cultures. Yeah, that's the limit to my knowledge. Yeah. Any other questions about getting the offer and how you handle that? Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, all my advice to that point of, yeah, I'm speaking from this one perspective. All my advice is based on my super privileged Gen X, white, male, cisgender mental model, right? And I put these tweets here to put some perspective toward that, of this person saying, you know how some people used to think photographs took away part of your soul? I believe this about cover letters. And then somebody says, as an HR manager who worked as a recruiting manager for years, I can honestly say that I never once read through a single cover letter, like ever. And somebody says an accepted truth, and yet we are repeatedly told how important they are. God, I hate them. And this other person who says my career advice has devolved to write a specific cover letter and listen to Stronger by Kelly Clarkson right before the interview. That's all I got. Right? Okay, so I want to know what your thoughts are, right? Do we don't do cover letters? Don't negotiate? What's it like for other cultures? Because Marta, you're saying here in Spain it's different, but it's great to know how it works in other countries when you're looking for a job abroad. Sure, yeah, of course. So we're going to put you all into breakout rooms. And then you're all going to discuss. It's amazing listening to Kelly Clarkson next time I write a cover letter. Yeah, excellent. And we're going to put you into breakout rooms, and I want you to discuss these thoughts among yourselves and just talk about this. Like, should we do this? I want you to talk about other ideas for interviews, right? Or other ideas for when the offer happens and what you should do. Let's discuss those things. I'll pop around maybe to you and pop in and out, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss for a few more minutes. Sound good? Okay, look for your